What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the YouTube channel. I got my boy Caleb here with me just a day or two after Christmas. We have a couple more days until we're in 2024, so we want to go out in 2023 with a bang. Caleb, my guy, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good, doing good. How about you?
Pretty good, pretty good. Can't complain. Like we were just talking about Christmas leftovers. A lot of good sports games on yesterday. You had NBA,
Oh
NFL. I
yeah.
mean, I was chilling the whole day just watching those games with the fam. But speaking of Christmas, we got to have a conversation. We're going to start the show talking about a tweet that LeBron James himself had. He was talking about how he's always excited for Christmas games, always excited for NBA Christmas. But one thing he misses, Christmas jerseys. And that got me thinking the entire aura that Christmas games used to have and the whole NBA on Christmas Day had just a few years ago is seemingly gone now. The competition, it's still there for some games, but just the whole theme. You have a lot of people our age talking about how Christmas doesn't really feel the same anymore. I'm not exactly on that fence, but I definitely agree that Christmas games don't hit the same because I don't know if it's lack of marketing, lack of creativity. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like back then, first one of my first NBA memories was that 2012 lockout season where the players and like the ownership they couldn't really come to a decision on like how to start. And when they finally did, they announced that it would be a shortened season, but it would start on Christmas. And I remember like ever since then, just being super excited to sort of sit down on the couch with family, right after getting your gifts, and then whether you're staying home and hosting a party or traveling to see family or friends. The thing I can remember, especially being from Southern California, that Lakers game, Bulls Lakers, was definitely one of my best memories. Derrick Rose hitting that game winner after he stripped Kobe, and certain games like recently Giannis coming back against the Celtics, being a big Giannis fan myself, that one hit, as well as the infamous Cavs Warriors games after the 2016 finals where Kevin Durant, the first like marquee matchup between those two teams who, let's be honest, we all knew that they'd be both in the finals again. But I feel like ever since then, maybe the Battle of LA being the most like recent one that I can remember. I remember Pat Bev went off that game and had a big block at the end and talked a bunch of trash. But ever since then, I feel like modern day Christmas games, for whatever reason, it just doesn't hit the same. So I feel, those jerseys back then, whether it was the sleeves or the straight colorways, those definitely like brought a certain element to it. But ever since the NBA went from Adidas to Nike, I feel like it's kind of the soul's kind of been taken out of it. I mean, I know I saw a bunch of snowflakes on the back of jerseys this year, but it just doesn't really have that sort of festive feel. And I'm curious to know your thoughts, Noel, about this year's Christmas games. Like, how did you feel about them?
Yeah, I mean, competition wise, I couldn't really complain too much. I mean, even though my Lakers did lose to the Celtics, still exciting overall. I think we got a great game to start with the Knicks and the Bucks. You got two, you know, Eastern Conference teams that are kind of building themselves up after some offseason changes. So can't be too mad about that. Luka Doncic went crazy, 50 points, 15
Yeah,
assists,
that
completely
man hates
dismantled
hates
that
the
Suns
Suns.
team.
Absolutely hates the
But
Suns.
I mean, Grayson Allen was carrying the Suns for a good stretch of that game. So that was something to see for sure. But I mean, just talking about the jerseys, like you were saying, I think overall we've seen the NBA try to do this thing where it's like every single year they try to implement new city jerseys, new retro jerseys, there's all these changes ever since, like you said, they switched from Adidas to Nike. But I think they just need to keep things simple. You got to keep the jerseys, the simple ones, the ones that have been doing you justice over the past couple of years. For example, the Miami Heat had a beautiful South Beach jersey the first time they rolled it out, but then they kept making changes year after year, and then fans just got burned out. So I think you just, like I said, you got to keep simple. You got to see what works. And the NBA had a good thing with the Christmas jerseys, a really good thing. They, like I said, they kept it very simple. I think about when the Lakers played against the New York Knicks. The Lakers had that beautiful white jersey. The Knicks had that beautiful orange jersey, and it just worked. But I think that they put in a lot of money towards things like the in-season tournament, which is great, and marketing in other areas. But I do think that the promotion, you could get some commercials again, like that iconic when they're shooting and they're doing the bells. I'm talking about that iconic NBA
Oh
commercial.
yeah, that
So
Jingle Hoops commercial that never
exactly,
gets old. Never gets old.
exactly. Like if they did a remake of that with like players that embody the superstars that were there, and you could still have LeBron, obviously. I mean, he's like I said, he has not gone anywhere. I just think that that type of promotion is lacking, and like jersey standpoint, you got to bring them back. And also, one other thing I want to talk about is the signature shoes. We used to have Kobe. having his own Christmas
Hmm.
shoe, KD, LeBron. I did see Ja bust out his chimney shoes. Those are pretty fire. But I mean, just overall, do you think that the NBA needs to do better from a promotion standpoint, or maybe even better matchups?
I think the matchups have been fine. The Mavs Suns one was, I think, the most rooted in sort of a rivalry that we have today. I get that Celtics and Lakers is really historic. You
Yeah,
had the Nuggets and Warriors; they had a playoff battle a couple years ago. Sixers and Heat, they've had some decent playoff battles over the years, but no Embiid and Jimmy Butler obviously hurt that matchup a lot. I know Jaime Jaquez Jr., shout out UCLA. He had a really good game. Tyrese Maxey went kind of cold for a stretch there, but I think it's going to be really interesting, not just for Christmas, but I think overall. What happens when LeBron eventually retires? Because the NBA is super dependent on ratings, and LeBron is the biggest box office draw of everybody. Whether it be people who hate him, people who love him, Lakers fans right now, Lakers haters, all of that kind of meshes into sort of one perfect package, and it makes sense why they put him in the middle of the day. When the most eyes could be on him. My question is now, like, what's going to happen? Like, who the NBA might promote next to be the next face? I mean, you got a bunch of young stars like Tatum, you got Luka, you got Ant, Ja, but you know, for in terms of Christmas games, LeBron's played more than anybody on Christmas. That man has not had a Christmas day off. I think in nearly 2 decades.
yeah,
So, uh, like, it's just going to be super interesting to see what happens, and how the NBA is going to sort of navigate that in probably the next, I want to say, at most 5 years. So yeah, not much time left, and we'll see what happens. I mean, they did it when Jordan left, and they kind of replaced him thanks to LeBron being so good. But now the question remains of, like, what's next? Not just for Christmas, but I think the overall NBA season as well.
yeah, for sure. And real quick before we dive into the next topic, I think it's pretty interesting that you bring up the Jordan being replaced with LeBron thing because I think we're going to be in an era similar to when Jordan retired the first time from his, or not my bad, the second time from that second Bull stint where he had his second three-peat. We were in that little era where you had a bunch of young rising stars. You had guys like Kobe, you had T-Mac, you had Vince Carter, I mean, you
Yes.
had Dirk, you had Tim Duncan and David Robinson. I think we're going to be in that era until we eventually do get that superstar that's going to take LeBron's reign. And I'm really excited for that because obviously I wasn't alive at that time. And even right before LeBron got drafted, I was just born 2002.
Yeah.
But that was very exciting time basketball where it was just young stars, young talent, and dudes were rocking their own jerseys in the All-Star game. So I'm excited for another era like that before another generational star comes around. It could be Wemby. We're going to see.
Could be.
But talking about that young talent that you just brought up, guys like Ant, Tatum, Devin Booker, John Morant, Luka, we got to talk about the MVP race that's going on right now. Because,
Yes.
I mean, we just hit Christmas. That's usually when you have a very good idea of not just how teams are performing, but pretty much who the top guys are in the league right now. Obviously, you have guys like Joel Embiid, Nikola Jokic. Those two guys are probably going to be the pinnacle of MVP conversations for at least the next couple seasons. Who are some other guys, Caleb, that you think have a good chance of winning, or maybe just one favorite you have outside of those two?
I think the favorite for me, being on topic from like the 50 ball that he had recently on Christmas, I think it has to be Luka. For what he's done with the roster around him, especially with Kyrie Irving being hurt this season thanks to a heel injury. Um, it's just another case of him being the system a la Harden back in the day, but he is truly making guys who typically wouldn't be great role players on other teams, he's making them look like superstars. I mean, these averages of 33 and a half points, 8.5 rebounds, and 9.4 assists, and 1.4 steals. And that's really important because I think a knock on him coming into this season, alongside, his like super poor tendency of complaining to refs after not getting any calls. I think his defensive intensity has really picked up this season. You pair that with his great playmaking, his really good skill of rebounding as a guard, and just the insane sort of pace that he plays with. Like, the game never seems too fast or too slow for him. He just gets to his spots consistently, and he's always going to make the right play, whether it's, stepping back on the wing for a 3-point shot, taking a little mid-range jumper from the post because he has that array of post moves that he can go to, or simply just bullying his way to the rim because he's 6'8" and a tank. It's been really impressive to watch. And I think, he's part of the reason why they're still sort of like even in that play-in race, because the West is stacked this year. You got teams like Minnesota, OKC, The Kings are still doing pretty well, which we'll touch on a bit later. But Dallas, for sure, they would not be anywhere near like this close in the standings without Luka.
100% agree. Luka is just insane at this point. Everybody comes in saying he looks out of shape, saying, like you said, that he's crying to refs, that he has a tendency to kind of distract his team when he goes on these sorts of tangents. But I mean, everybody that tuned into Christmas Day yesterday saw what he did. It looked like at times he was just walking into threes. He was just going down there. He had guys trailing him. He would just give him a little shove, step back. And it's like dudes aren't even in front of him at this point. So I definitely do love that pick. I think especially like you said, with Kyrie being out, with you having a rookie center in Derek Lively and Luka bringing the best out of him, that speaks a lot to not just the scorer he is, but how he makes his teammates better. 15 assists to go with 50 points. I mean, that's insane. But I'm going to have to go with Jayson Tatum. He's obviously leading the Celtics, best record in the league right now, just ahead of the Milwaukee Bucks and the Minnesota Timberwolves. I do want to give a shout out to Anthony Edwards. I do think he's having an amazing season, and he's done a great job at leading both Cat, Rudy Gobert, the rest of that team that we talked about last episode. But Jayson Tatum, 24 points, 4 assists. His scoring is definitely down compared to the past 2 seasons. But just by watching him, I think he's making the sacrifices needed in order to bring the best out of his other teammates. Kristaps Porzingis, he was injured for the past couple games. Luckily, he came back on Christmas. Unfortunately, took down the Lakers, played a big role in that. But I just think that we're starting to see a more mature Tatum. His playmaking still needs to get up there a little bit better. You have Drew Holiday with them on the wing. You have Jaylen Brown. That's kind of been the duo right there that haven't lived up to expectations the past couple of years. I think everybody would have liked at least 1 ring out of the 8 that Jaylen Brown promised in that interview. You know what I'm saying?
You get to talking to Taylor Rooks. I mean, you get speaking crazy about anybody. So,
it seems like it's a tendency among those guys. But back to Tatum, I think he's the archetype that most players are looking to be these days. He's tall. He can score from all 3 levels. Like I said, his playmaking needs to develop, but he has taken a step up on defense. And I'm liking a lot what I'm seeing from him. I mean, that Eastern Conference, it's not as strong as the West, obviously, but you still take a look at the top. You have Philly, you have other teams that are going crazy right now. So it's not the easiest, and it's not the Western Conference either. But I definitely do think that he's at the top of my list right now. Are there any other guys besides Luka you think are making a push for the MVP right now?
I think it goes without saying. Tatum's done a really good job. I know that nearly all their starters, Boston, they scored 20 against LA. So that entire starting lineup is just playing a really balanced and beautiful team brand of basketball. But we mentioned OKC back in the previous episode, and I think Shea has to get his credit for that. They just took down the Minnesota Timberwolves tonight as we're recording this, and Shea had another big game, another 30 ball, 9 assists on really efficient shooting, and it's looking scary. I mean, this guy, he's not even at his peak yet, which is really scary to think about, because last year he was getting to his spots at 31 points a game, basically getting to the free throw line at will. And the fact that he's not even shooting that many threes and still getting up to 30, that's really hard to do in this league. You pair that with some really good defense, I'm pretty sure he's at the top of the leaderboard in steals and just leading a super young roster up to where they are, the 2 seed still. I've been really impressed with what Shea's doing, along with the Thunder as a whole. So that'd be my other topic. But moving on to sort of the next conversation, I feel like it's around this time where, teams, we know kind of what they are, what they're not, who's going to be a buyer, who's going to be a seller. Like the trade deadline's coming up soon, as well as, all-star picks. So another topic that we wanted to cover was some possible trade candidates and maybe some teams that might look to add at the deadline. Noel, if you had any team that you think might need a piece or two, who would you say that might be?
You see, this team right here, they've been playing amazing basketball. They've kind of shocked a lot of people after some drama that was going on at the beginning of the season. And I think I get it when people say they might not want to tinker with everything they got going on right now. But I think the Philadelphia 76ers could make a big move at the deadline and kind of maybe make themselves the favorite in the Eastern Conference. Like I said, they're up there with the Milwaukee Bucks and the Boston Celtics. But we saw Tyrese Maxey struggle yesterday on Christmas. He wasn't able to handle the complete offensive load, and that's okay. He's still a very young player. He's taken an amazing leap this season after the James Harden trade, and he's been a great number 2 to Joel Embiid. So, like I said, no knock to him at all, but I do think that Philly could get pretty aggressive at the trade deadline, and I think someone that they could get that could take them over the top is Lauri Markkanen. Reports are starting to come out that him and John Collins could be on the trade market, And I find Laurie obviously a lot more intriguing than John Collins. He's someone that burst out onto the scene last season. He's tall, he can shoot the ball, he gets to the rim. He became one of the first 7-footers to record like over 100 3-pointers along with a certain number of dunks. So, I mean, he's aggressive in really every way, shape, and form. And like we talked about last episode too, once he went overseas to represent his country, he really got comfortable. And like I said, I think that's when he became the man. So the way I'm looking is that Philly would like to move off of Tobias Harris and Morris, rightfully so. And they also have a number of picks that they can include in a deal. And we all know that OKC and Sam Presti love their picks. I do think that other teams are going to be aggressive trying to land Laurie, specifically some contenders. So it's going to get very, very interesting. But that is a contender I think can make a move. And I mean, if you could get Laurie, you got Joel Embiid, Laurie Markin, and Tyrese Maxey. That is a great three to take into the playoffs.
Yes.
But how about you, Caleb? What team do you think could potentially make a move at the deadline?
Philly was a good one because obviously coming off that James Harden trade, they got a bunch of assets back, a bunch of guys on expiring contracts for that big salary over with Harden. They got some picks too, so it'll be interesting to see what they do there. For me, I'm going to pivot out west, and as I mentioned before, earlier in the spot, I think the Sacramento Kings could be that one team that could definitely take a move. They surprised everybody last season by being the 3 seed. They took the Warriors, defending champs, to Game 7. Kevin Huerter and Keegan Murray kind of struggled throughout that series, but they still have a great duo in Fox and Sabonis. And I think Keegan Murray, he's taken a big leap. I know that he put up 45 points with like 13 threes, something like that, earlier this month. It was a really impressive shooting display, and he's been really dominant on defense as well. You pair that with sort of the dribble handoff game with Sabonis, one of the best passers, period, in the league, not just for a big man. And Fox has taken another leap with 30 and 7. I feel like with their array picks, and I feel like they've been in the mix for quite a while now, is sort of a young team with a lot of assets that they could part with. And what better team to look at than sort of the Toronto Raptors and sort of the fallout of their championship window. You kind of had this team around Kawhi with Kyle Lowry, OG Anunoby, Pascal Siakam, Fred VanVleet, and all those pieces have kind of gone. Most of them departed in free agency for nothing, and now it's kind of just OG and Pascal left. And I know that there's been a bunch of trade rumors surrounding them, but I feel like if the Kings could get one of those two pieces, you talk about OG, he's one of the best defenders in the NBA. He could guard 1 through 5, get his 3-point shot up at a 40% clip. And in this sort of era of pace and space, I think you need that for your team. But if you wanted to maybe slide Keegan to the 3, I think Pascal makes a lot of sense as well. Obviously on the older side, not much of a spacer, but he could still, improve that defense and provide some versatility and some more post play for Sacramento if they want to make a charge at maybe a top 3 seed once again. I think it makes a lot of sense for them.
No, I think that's an awesome take right there. I mean, Sacramento, they light the beam movement last season, going against the Warriors, taking them to 7, almost upsetting them in that first round. Huge leap. They got the respect of the entire basketball world. And I think either one of those pieces would kind of put them over the top and really make them, maybe a top 4 team in the Western Conference. I think that would be awesome right there. What do you think about a Zach LaVine trade, though? I think that's someone that's also been floating around towards the Kings, and I'm curious to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I've seen sort of the mentions of like a Herder and maybe a pick for Zach LaVine. Given his current injury right now, though, he's been sidelined for Chicago for a couple weeks now, and surprisingly, they seem to be playing better without him.
Yep, Kobe White
stepped
into that role.
Yeah, Kobe White definitely with that starting 2-guard role, he's definitely shot out of his mind. I know that Andre Drummond, he got his first start, and he put up 24 and 25. Something I did not expect to see.
Vintage Drummond, right?
Vintage Drummond, if you want to call it that. Took a time machine straight to 2016. But back to the original point, I think LaVine, for as talented as he is, a volume scorer, no doubt. I just don't know if he's going to move the needle for a championship contender as a second or third option. He's a very talented scorer. He can get a lot of threes up. He could drive to the lane pretty effectively, but Sacramento's main problem, I think last season, it was defense. Sabonis, not exactly the best rim protector. Keegan, while he's made strides on the perimeter this season, I'm not sure if shipping out Kevin Huerter for Zach LaVine, if that's like, the proposed deal, I'm not really sure how much that raises your ceiling, to be honest. Another guard that's been floated out east in sort of that playing range. I recently saw a rumor that DeJounte Murray uh, might be headed out of Atlanta, and one destination that was projected being a clutch Klein and all, the Lakers. I know that's your favorite team,
Yes,
Noel.
sir.
What are your thoughts on that?
See, we are just talking about Zach LaVine. He's been the guy that has been heavily linked to the team, and as much as I like LaVine, I watched him since UCLA. I saw him in Minnesota, and I saw him become a star in Chicago. His contract is the biggest thing that concerns me. Essentially,
Yes.
trading for Zach LaVine would mean that you are locking in Zach LaVine to be your number 2 to Anthony Davis for the next 4 years. That contract, he's going to be making $40 million next year. That is an insane amount, and like I said, he's very talented. But then you look at someone like DeJounte Murray. His 4-year, $120 million contract extension is going to kick in next season. Going to be making $18 million this year. So that is a much more tradable contract. My only concern is that I don't know if a package of Rui, D'Lo, and a pick, or Rui, D'Lo, and Jalen Hood-Schifino is going to move the needle for Atlanta. I love the fit, though. Don't get me wrong. He could defend. He's shooting 38% from 3 on like 6 attempts per game this year. And he's playing really good when he's the point guard. And that's the problem right there. That's why Atlanta is looking to trade him, because you have Trae Young as your point guard. You can't have, DeJounte Murray being the number 1 point guard on your team. You need to lock in Trae, who's making all that money. So I would love it. I think he would be great next to LeBron and AD, but I just feel like other teams are going to have better packages out there for him, unfortunately. But yeah, I think we're going to end it on that note right there. I mean, like, today is December 26th. We're about a little over 2 months away from the trade deadline, or like a month and a half.
Yeah.
February 15th. So it's going to get really scary up in there. We had all kinds of crazy stuff happen last year. You had KD to the Suns, all kinds of crazy stuff. So do not count any team out. Do not count any trade outs. Caleb, thank you so much for joining me once again, man. Really excited to get back to you guys next week, and let us know if there's any topics that you want us to cover. Thank you guys for tuning in.